about realism in video games and why I think it actually might be a bad thing. But then again, it could be a good thing depending on your perspective of the game, right? So for me personally, realism in video games is not necessarily a bad thing. The thing about it for me personally is that sometimes I feel like when a game is too realistic and it tries to be so realistic with facial structures or whatever you want to call it, facial movements, it tends to just be a little bit boring. Let's go for an example, right? For one example is pretty much Rise, Son of Rome. It pretty much had like a ton of facial features and a lot of good things going for it from the animations department. The problem with that is just that it wasn't really very immersive. Nor was it really well written and very interesting. You kind of forgot about it because it just wasn't really fun. But then you compare it to another launch title from Xbox, which was probably almost the exact same thing, which had realism but a little bit of cartoony violence or whatever it may be. But then it was also kind of fun, and that being Dead Rising 3. Now that game is pretty much almost not the same per se, but they are from Xbox and they kind of came out around the same time. The thing about Dead Rising 3 was that it managed to actually be fun, but also being slightly realistic by making you slightly get invested with some of these characters, but not taking itself so seriously to the point where it tried to be, a human-like emotion rather than actually being something that you forget that it's supposed to be, and that is a game, and that's what a lot of developers kind of forget. Now you look at something like Mario or whatever it may be, those are fun games because they're a little bit cartoony, they're a little bit out there. You want to go to different worlds, right? You want to have that escapism. I don't play games to play somebody else's real world life. Don't get me wrong, The Last of Us is fun, and sometimes I do like to replay it, but I'm not gonna lie, I'd rather play something like an old school Resident Evil that's a little bit more over the top and a little bit more foolish. Now, The Last of Us is obviously not a zombie game, we know that, but it's still kind of, that's by horror mode. You get my point. The thing is that even though realism, I think the key for realism in video games tends to be that you get more of an immersion with the characters. There's better written scripts, and you definitely feel more of that emotion coming through screen, especially when it comes to face structures. But sometimes I feel like on certain developers, that's for sure, not all of them, certain developers I feel like sacrifice the facial structures rather than having good gameplay and some interesting world to kind of transport you in. Now, granted, as I said, for Mario and Zelda, they have that cartoony vibe to it, and definitely kind of makes you get immersed, and you could play those games for hours upon hours. But then you look at a game that was like overly serious, like The Order 1886, which tried a little bit too hard to be realistic, and then therefore it just kind of came off as a very bland fucking movie that nobody really even remembered. Now, for me personally, you look at another game like LA Noire, a very serious and not really over-the-top game, even though it's from Rockstar. There was really no humor personally in there. It's very straightforward, just like a cop thing, and there was really no gameplay, no fast car chases, no nothing other than, arrest this guy, shoot him, that's pretty much it. There was nothing really to it. Now, is that fun? Sure, I like LA Noire, but it's just not that much, to do. But when you compare it to something like GTA, which is obviously a bad thing to do, or even true crime, let's compare to true crime. Remember true crime, people? Or Sleeping Dogs. That's a world that's a little bit over the top, but slightly in a realistic world. Realism is not a bad thing, but when you look at something compared to Call of Duty for shooters, very serious thing. Nobody really cares about Call of Duty, but once they hit to the zombies and has a little bit more fun to it, that's when people kind of get more immersed, and that's when it's not taken too seriously. Realism, I feel like when you kind of have the game too realistic and you're playing, bike riding or you're playing tennis or whatever it may be, I feel like then you kind of look at yourself in the mirror and just be like, why am I playing somebody else's real world life where I could just go outside and do it? Whereas you can still throw the argument out there for like cartoony or whatever it may be, but I feel like when it comes to cartoons, or not cartoons, but like a cartoony violence or whatever, or cartoony vibe, then I feel like it's a little bit more easier to kind of be like, I'm just having fun, because that's essentially what a game's supposed to be. I don't want a game that's so like over daunting and very serious or whatever it may be. I play games to have fun. Don't get me wrong. Some games can have a good story, fun gameplay, and then immersing characters that really can get you going with great facial animations. For an example, like Uncharted. But some games I feel like do try to do it too much to the point where they forget that they're essentially supposed to be games. Now, is realism a bad thing in video games? No, but I go to play games to kind of get immersed in a world that is not my own. If I want to play a game that is essentially the world that I live in, then I hate to say it, but I pretty much would live my life. Obviously, you can do some shits like in GTA, killing people, whatever it may be, because that's bad. But when you compare GTA 5, obviously, or GTA 4 to like the PS2 eras, they're a very different style. I guarantee you, I'm almost 100% positive, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm 100% positive that you will probably play the PS2 era of GTAs more than GTA 4 and 5. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you probably do, because I do. Now, I love GTA 4 and 5, but the PS2 era was just more fun because it was just a wacky world that you can do things, right? When you have a world that has boundaries, like your own world, it's not really that fun. I want a world that has no boundaries. I want to fly a fucking plane. I want to throw it a fucking flamethrower. I want a little bit of a craziness to that world. So sometimes when I feel like realism does kind of take an according to like the gaming approach, sometimes it's not that good. The virtual reality thing is kind of taking effect now. Hopefully it doesn't really do that good. I don't think it's gonna do well. But virtual reality gaming, I don't really want that. I don't want to. It's like I'm right in there. Like immersion, great. Immersion is different from reality. Quite frankly, I want immersion. But if it's just like a realistic world, then it's just like, who cares? Because when you look at all these graphics, you be like, it's so realistic. That's great, but is it fun? I don't need a game that's just realistic. I need a game that's fun with a good story and good characters. Very few games can do that. Very few developers can do that. Even more, not a lot of companies can do that. But it is what it is. Assassin's Creed is kind of over the top in some cases and a little, cartoonish on some occasions. But then it can also be very serious at times. Now, what would you people rather have? Would you rather have something that's overly serious and kind of like a realistic approach to games? Would you rather have something a little bit more over the top, slightly serious, kind of like the PS2 era of GTA 8, for example? But a little bit cartoony, not takes itself too seriously. Or would you rather have something that could do both? But if you have to choose one, what would you rather choose? For me personally, I'd rather have something that's a little bit more fun. If I'm paying $60, I don't want to be bored by somebody's basic life. You look at Heavy Rain, the first few minutes of that shit, you're pretty much doing life. You're pretty much fixing bread, you're doing all that thing. You'd be like, if I wanted to fix fucking dishes, I'm going to fix dishes. I'm not going to pay $60 to play somebody who's playing dishes or washing dishes. It just doesn't really make that much sense. But overall, that's just kind of my thoughts on realism. Sometimes realism, I feel like, sacrifices the gameplay, and sometimes I feel like it kind of makes the game a little bit more boring because developers are so trying to make it so realistic and trying to stick to real world boundaries that it doesn't really make it become a game. It just essentially makes it become a bit of a chore, like I said, for like Heavy Rain. But if you enjoyed any of my comments or my sentiments, whatever you want to call it, if you disagree, then I guess you disagree, but let me know what you think on this subject. Is realism a bad thing in gaming? Is it a good thing in gaming? But it's definitely a place for both. I agree on that. But if you had to choose one or the other, what would you rather choose? Let me know. Comment, subscribe, and like if you actually enjoyed anything in this video. Help me get to 400 subscribers. I'm Chris Smith, and I'm signing out.